Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Media Monday show. Here with some of our friends from around. And did Shaquille, was he able to get the link? Were you able to send him that? Well, I can't hear you.
I just sent it.
Oh, you did? Okay, great. Yeah, because the thing is, we've had problems getting our links out, which is quite unusual, but not unusual. Anyway, with us, we have David Grasso from the Bold TV Network, Kim Calhoun from the IBM TV Network and Pod TV. And we're going to be discussing some of the issues that relate to the media today. And one of them, the one that you brought up last week, was the news. That, in other words, the news not being listened to, David, by people that are under age 60. Now, we just got done. That's the reason why I transitioned over here from Economics Monday with the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, who put together a really great program that we and Kim, when we were talking about healthcare, I wanted to do a whole special evergreen show on healthcare because I think it's an important issue for Economics Monday. But I was going to do it in January when I got to have my experts on board. All right. But David brought up an interesting issue that exists today, and I would like him to elaborate on that young people are not getting their news through traditional media. Can you explain a little bit about what's going on with the young people and what they're doing in terms of getting their traditional news?
Well, young people consume less news. Let's start there, right? So when you're a young person, you tend to be less interested in politics and tend to be less interested in news. So right there, your news diet is going to be greatly reduced. Additionally, the way we consume print media is very different. We consume different outlets than older people, specifically because older outlets are behind paywalls. So we skip over that as well. And there's been a lot of cord cutting lately. Cord cutting, or having a streaming platform instead of a cable package, is the norm these days. And if you've noticed, news hasn't quite figured out how to play the streaming game. In fact, there is almost no streaming news available. If you do have news available on streaming, it's actually piping straight back to the legacy networks. And what I was mentioning is that there was an article that came out in Deadline that talked about an old veteran that said, hey, I've been warning the news since the 1980s. Granted, I was born in the 1980s, so this was more than 30 years ago. We need to change. We need to come up with the times. And fundamentally, the format of news hasn't changed in more than 30 years. And you can't have a business model that's 30 years old and expect to compete in today's world. So young people are just tuning things out, especially as media becomes more about bickering, specifically partisan bickering, punditry, instead of real journalism. If we look at the way the networks have changed, they put a bunch of talking heads in a row and they just bloviate for 30 minutes, and then that's the news. That was not the news 10 years ago. This is something relatively recent, and I think it's driving people away in droves, especially younger people that are allegedly in the key demographic. According to Nielsen, the key demographic used to be 25 to 54. If you look at all the news shows, the bulk of their audience is way over 54 years old.
Okay. Tremonte has joined us. What are your thoughts about the news? In other words, where young people aren't getting their news anymore through traditional sources, like in the United States, we have ABC, CBS, NBC, and instead they go to social media and other places. What are your thoughts on that in terms of where people are getting their news?
I'm actually one of those young people that are getting.
That's the reason I asked you. I was going, where are you getting your news from?
So I get my news from a variety of sources. I get my news from traditional sources as well as social media, like Twitter, LinkedIn, even I wouldn't necessarily say news, but kind of like happening now, current events, sometimes Instagram, just depending. But I would say first and foremost, use the more traditional routes. Like I try to watch networks that are nonpartisan. So I'm not going to name any specifically, but to the extent possible, networks that are unbiased in how they report and neutral, nonpartisan. But so, yeah, I think that the advantage of using different mediums like social media is you may actually be able to get news quicker. You may be, just like privy to, breaking whatever's breaking faster than like on a traditional network. Also, a lot of companies and a lot of people use these networks to break news, as opposed to, booking a formal slot on, on a TV network, or waiting for a journalist to pick it up, to pick the story up. So
now you also have your own show. Could you tell our viewers a little bit about the show that you broadcast?
I do. I have my own show with the EdUp Network. I don't know if you are familiar with the EdUp Network. We have quite a few shows on our network. My show is a podcast that's focused on STEM. STEM is, I guess I don't want to assume that everyone knows what STEM is, but STEM is the acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I am in the tech field myself. So my show highlights leaders, educators, thought leaders, founders, all in the STEM space. So I have a variety of people, whether it's, folks working at companies like Microsoft, such as myself, major companies, or startup founders, or researchers. It's very, very diverse as far as my guest. So if you know anyone who might be good, send them my way.
I do know somebody who's pretty good, and he's
Okay.
here with us. David Grasso, can you tell us a little bit about the network that you run, which is Bold TV?
Bold TV started as a network. Specifically, my role in Bold TV was interviewing founders, just like what was mentioned. I interviewed entrepreneurs and talked about the hustle and whatnot as the host of the show Bold Business I was the host for 18 months before I became CEO. Today, Bold TV is finding a sustainable way to reach young people who have cord cut and have no sustainable access to news, specifically nonpartisan news. So if you're looking for that nonpartisan bent, we're definitely a stop along the way. I'm curious to know actually what TV you're watching that it is nonpartisan, because I don't see any. So I turn on the TV and I see a lot of political extremism is what I see on both sides. And the big networks are some of the worst ones. And, I've said this many times on the show before, but CNN was historically the most middle of the road network. And these days, CNN has definitely become MSNBC light or left wing. So I'm wondering, where is this nonpartisan TV you're watching?
Well, I said I try. I said I try to watch news from nonpartisan sources. So I didn't say that that's always possible, but I agree with you as far as CNN, as far as their history of being, kind of middle of the road amongst all the major networks. That's changed a bit. I think all of the networks have gotten more partisan, unfortunately, but as boring as it is, you would have to say C-SPAN, right? And that's not even necessarily
there is someone new on the scene.
Comprehensive news, but I would probably be the most nonpartisan.
There is someone new on the scene. They're called News Nation. If you've never seen them, they're by Nexstar. So Nexstar is a chain of local news stations. Actually, my competitor, where I was a reporter in the Amarillo, Texas TV market, it was called Nexstar. Nexstar owns News Nation, and they're exactly trying to do that. They're trying to fill the void of CNN, which is basically, you turn on the TV, you get information, you turn it off. That's what we try to do at Bold TV every day through short videos that are socially native. So we make content for social media so that we can reach people in the medium that they prefer, specifically young people.
Mark, what are your thoughts about the news? In other words, you're a journalism major, and you've been in this industry a long time. Are young people getting their news under 60 not from the major networks, and they're going elsewhere? What are your thoughts?
Oh, they're definitely getting it from elsewhere. I'm actually, as I've alluded to several times, become a big fan of Clubhouse, and Clubhouse actually has entire rooms that are dedicated toward the news. I mean, there are entire rooms where they are having different people that will bring the headlines to you and the headlines of interest. It might be a headline in tech. It might be a headline in something to do with politics. It might be a headline even in the health fields. And a lot of times they will just bring you the headlines that they have found and then give you their interpretation of what that headline was and their views of it, and then have an open dialogue about that. So that is something that I have become a big fan of. I've actually found some stories and some guests from going into those rooms like that. And I'm also a big fan of blogs. And sometimes those blogs are very much biased. They may have a certain bias of one sort or another. I know that my friend Reverend Kenny does one called Revolution, and it talks about a lot of Durham politics and a lot around social justice and other issues. And he would even tell you that he probably has a bias as well. And he actually studied, I want to say, both theology and journalism at Columbia, which is one of the Columbia that's over there in Missouri and all of that. So the University of Missouri at Columbia, I should say. But even he would say, and I would agree with him, that this whole notion of journalistic objectivity is actually an outdated kind of belief and an outdated system, because I think that most people have a bias of one sort or another. You try to cover it in the most objective and fair way that you can. But I do think that even most of the journalism schools are letting you know that you will have inherent bias. And those are just things that you have to try to fight against, even in your coverage and your reporting. But most of the great journalism schools of the country, and I would argue the world, would let you know that as just nature of human beings, that we have a certain inherent bias on certain issues and another. And it's just a matter of trying to fight against those biases when they exist. And I saw that Kimberly was waving her hand. Maybe she's got a thought too.
Well, you have to unmute yourself, Kim.
I was just I was trying to send a link to Shaq. I'm glad to see he's on. So.
Oh yes, we have a guest.
Good points, Mark. Very, very good.
I have methodological issues.
We have a guest from Australia. Shaquille Latmer has joined us from down under. First of all, you have to ask questions. Do they have television in Australia? And then once you get beyond the kangaroos and television, then we got to find out whether or not they get their media through traditional sources, or do young people get it through anti-traditional sources? So Shaquille, I know you're very quiet and reserved, so we're going to try to keep it down, the noise down a little bit. What's happening in Australia? Where are people getting their news at, mate?
Well, how would I know? I never spent any time in Australia, so what are you asking me for?
I thought you were trapped in Australia because of COVID.
Yeah, I'm trapped here, but I still pay attention to what's happening in America and in Europe.
But how do you pay attention?
So I wouldn't have a clue what's going on.
How do you pay attention rather than watching IBM TV, Pod TV? How do you pay attention to anything?
No, well, I have a press reader account, and I have another account, but I can't remember what it's called, so I can't reset my password to it because I can't remember what anything's called. But it's a really interesting service, and it provides you with, like, say you type in a news article, whatever the headline is. It's mostly US based, but it does do around the world as well. And it actually provides you with basically how the articles about that particular topic was written between left-wing media like CNN, right-wing media like Sky News Australia and Fox News in America, and more centrist media. So you actually get the viewpoints from a few different views. And I like that, because I like to understand, or at least know what other people are reading and what other people are saying. And in my personal opinion, people, across the world, but it just seems to be more pronounced in the United States. People are just operating off completely different facts. They're talking about completely different things, and you only have to look at any of these hot button topics, like even like the really controversial topics like abortion and euthanasia. Euthanasia is a big topic in Australia at the moment. People will take it to the extremes. So what happens if it's a grandmother who's, being pressured by her children and her grandchildren? She feels like she's a burden to her family. And what happens if somebody's just really depressed? Should that person, be able to access these services? But that's not what most people who are advocating for the issue are actually looking at. What they're looking at is, what happens if, you've got cancer, or you've got, some disease that you're basically not going to recover from. That's going to be a really long, drawn-out, painful death. Do you have the right to be able to say, look, give me a heap of morphine or whatever drug, and let me drift peacefully into the night with my family around me so I have some dignity? That's what people who are advocating for that want. The people who are advocating against it, which, by the way, is both sides of politics in Australia, the people who are advocating against it bring up all these other issues. And I think that is really indicative of what we see with everything. In the United States, it's more pronounced. It's people want to see the police departments be reformed and the justice system be reformed, you actually get bipartisan support, or at least the supporters of Republicans and the supporters of Democrats both agree on that issue, that there needs to be some reforms, it needs to be looked at, it's dysfunctional. And instead it devolves into people on the political right saying, police are heroes and they're absolutely magnificent and they should be given a lot more leeway. And the people on the political left saying, well, we should just defund them. We don't need them at all. We should get rid of them. They're this horrible racist, apparatus. And where you've got most people agreeing on something, you end up having the two political sides just talking past each other and nothing gets done. Nothing ends up happening which actually improves the lives of the everyday person. I think that's such a shame. But that's why I read both sides as much as I can. And I try to be sort of open-minded to especially people that I don't generally agree with or I don't think that I'm going to agree with.
Okay, yes, Tremonte.
I was just gonna say I get email alerts from certain news sources and notifications, mobile notifications. Mobile alerts are very helpful too in this, technology, push notifications, kind of almost kind of a first line of communication these days, right? Like even if you look on your phones now, likely you probably have a push notification from somewhere. So just a little FYI, sometimes you can get news really quick, really, really fast that way. Or like I'll wake up in the morning to, a nice rundown from the New York Times today talking about the Omicron. Can't believe that. My chapter is the Theta Omicron chapter at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So the fact that it's the Omicron now is the variant is crazy. But even the Delta, I guess the Deltas maybe were offended. The Delta is a fraternity as well, or sorority, organization. So they keep naming these variants after different Greek letter organizations. I'm just joking, but
Put the sororities and frat houses out of business.
Well, the thing is, another issue that I'm looking at is the U.S. news and news in general ADD on steroids. In other words, we can't pay attention to one issue to the next. And I'm going to give you an example that last week, the Ahmaud Arbery case, which we went over, was big news. Mm-hmm. And today it was buried. Last week, they were talking about the border crisis that exists between Belarus and Poland. This week it's buried, and all of a sudden they switch everybody, and everybody's got to talk about the Omicron variant. Are we having a problem sticking to any one particular topic and working with that topic, or is the United States and news in general ADD? Let's flash over to the next greatest thing. David, since you run Bold TV, do you have to run with the latest and greatest stuff out there, or can you actually explore an issue that should be still talked about but died because major media says it died? What are your thoughts?
Well, what Shaquille is saying is absolutely correct. We tend to traffic in extremes through media because it's really been the melding of politics with entertainment. If you look at news in the United States, it's not boring at all, but it's also not informative. If you turn on the BBC, it's terribly boring. They talk this slow and monotone. I don't know how you keep an audience if you talk like this.
Leave the Brits alone, David.
What?
Leave the Brits alone.
He's British by citizenship, so he's
listen,
very
sensitive.
By citizenship, I'm British.
You're British?
Listen,
oh my
but David,
sorry to hear that.
David, you're absolutely right, because it's become like a media celebrity type deal, and it's been that way for a while. I remember I went to the first inauguration of Obama, and I remember that one of the biggest moments was literally when Katie Couric came running by, and everybody was totally distracted because Katie Couric was coming by, and they wanted to know whether they could, catch up with her, get an autograph, do whatever else they were going to do. I was not one of those people trying to hunt her down, but they did have that kind of media celebrity, and it is a lot of times news stories that are that particular moment. I mean, every once in a while you'll get a report, but to your point, Nick, there are usually, even those reports are very limited in their time frame, and they're not done over an extensive basis and things of that nature. That's one of the things that I love about it.
Florida is the running joke of all incredible, dynamic, sensational news. as all of us that pay attention to the media know, if it happened, it probably happened in Florida.
You know why that is, right? There's a reason for that. It has nothing to do with Florida. I'm from Florida. It has to do with open
I'm from
records
Florida.
and large population. That's it. If
There's a large
California
population.
or Texas or New York had open records, it'd be a California man, a Texas man, a New York man. So I know
that's
Florida.
why it's always a Florida man.
In fairness, David,
That's
in
interesting.
fairness, I absolutely love Florida. And it's a hard pick, but I actually like Florida more than California, because Florida is more like Australia. Everything kills you there. You've got alligators, we've got crocodiles, you've got snakes. We've got snakes. You guys have got.
We're going to talk about the palm trees.
There. Yeah, palm trees. We've got them up
It
north.
reminds them of Australia because we got crocodiles.
Exactly. That's why I love Florida so much. But let me just say about the media. You're not going to hear a story. Let's say that tomorrow only one black person was killed, was murdered in the United States. That wouldn't be on the news. Nobody would say, hey, only one black person was killed. The media would say, this black person was killed and it's this, terrible travesty. They'll never say, hey, today we only had, 10 bank robberies. They're not going to say that. They're just going to talk about how bad those 10 bank robberies are, even though the historical average might be 50 a day. The fact you only had 10 is a massive improvement. The media's never going to talk about that. And even locally, so we, as you guys probably know, we had this terrible mass shooting in Christchurch. An Australian guy flew over to New Zealand. I'm not going to name him. I really do name people like that.
Is he a friend of yours?
He's not a friend of mine. Definitely not.
Never
But
sure.
I won't name the individual. I rarely.
Why did he fly all the way to Christchurch? Can't you find people to kill in Australia?
Well, he was able to access guns there more easily than here. But in any case,
gun
so
control.
he went over there and he shot up a mosque and he killed, I think it was about 50 people. Now, what was put on both Australian TV and New Zealand TV, that the main focus was this terrible man, what he did, all the victims, etc. What wasn't shown was that in the following few days, he shut up a mosque, was that a heap of New Zealander Christians went and stood guard at the mosque and told the Muslims there, come in, we will watch the entry for you. That story got no attention at all. And that's the thing with the media. They love to show you the blood and the guts. They love to show you the fires and the looting and all the rest of it. And, with the BLM protests last year, they'll show you all the terrible, horrible stuff that's going on, but they won't show you the people who are saying, look, I want this, I want that, I just want to have a fair shot. They won't show you those people who are being reasonable. They'll show you the most extreme. And so what ends up happening is people end up in this bit of a fear, and it happens on the right as well. They don't talk about people just being centre right. Look, I think there should be a few less regulations. I'd like there to be lower and more transparent taxes. They don't show those people. They've got to show the most extreme right-wing people. Yeah, and so what everyone believes is that the world has become this really extreme place, but it's not like that. And it's not like that anywhere in the world that I've been to, and I've been to a lot of countries.
Yeah.
Monday, you're muted, buddy. You have to unmute yourself.
And let's be honest, positive Black news stories aren't often highlighted. And so if you notice, I post on a variety of things here on LinkedIn, but I do use my platform to promote Black excellence and Black success. And so I've had people say, hey, I look forward to your next post because it's something that they're not going to get anywhere else, right? No one else may cover it. It's not going to get amplified in any other medium, right? So I realize that I kind of wear that as a badge of honor in a way, and to know that I'm posting about a story that is newsworthy and deserves to be acknowledged and recognized, and that immediately all of my followers are gonna get it. I love seeing those stories reshared. Sometimes I get stuff reshared 50, 60 times, even more sometimes. And just seeing those views go up for those stories that would never even be acknowledged, and to know that's why you see I added culture voice to my little title today.
Yeah, I saw that. I was going to put in mind the voice of reason, But
The voice of reason.
I think because I can't change it to the voice of unreason on this particular
Tamonte, to your point, hold on a second, Nick. Tamonte, to your point, I would even argue that, and I know we've had this conversation, even me and Shaquille, as to whether it's even a needed thing right now, whether we're HBCUs or historically Black press is needed as well. But to your point, Tamonte, I would argue that even our quote unquote own press does not do a good job of covering the major positive stories as well. I don't care whether it's the Amsterdam News or if you're here in Raleigh and this area, the Carolina Times or the Carolinian or a number of other press, and even our women press doesn't do a good job of addressing some of the great women leaders as well. And there are magazines that are geared toward women and geared toward even age demographics. As a matter of fact, one of my guests this evening will be talking about ageism, and she's actually an African-American woman that is very much about fighting against ageism. And as she puts it, y'all can still be, meaning women over the age of 50 or even the age of 70, because I want to say she's over the age of 70, can still be very active in their social life and even their sexual life. So she is actually making that discussion on a regular basis. Kim, what do you think? Do you think that?
So now I have something to say, and Mark, I'm going to add to what you just said. And one of the things Nick and I learned in our journey of growing a TV network and going to NAPTI and talking with the president of CBS is that they are not encouraged to promote positive influences and news. What we were always told, if it don't bleed, it don't lead. We don't want it. Right. And they want to give people these negative impacts. They want to drive you to, and please excuse this, but they want to drive you to racism. They want you to drive into hate. They want conflict. Why? Because you and the world watch it. And I'm going to tell you something. I have literally for 1 week not been able to watch news. And my attitude has jumped up to here. My can-do spirit has jumped up to here. I'm not listening to the conflicts, and everything's starting to become this positive vibe. There are positive podcasts out there, but not enough people watch it because it's not negative. I mean, look what Jersey Shore's did, right? To me, excuse me, guys, the worst TV show I've ever seen in my freaking life. And all these people started watching it because it was rumors and conflict and drama. And that's what the networks want. If they have to make it up, there is no more honest media. There is no more honest media. It's all about splitting us, dividing us. And none of the networks, I heard, One America or something like that. They're non-political. Bull crap, I've watched them. So, it's all biased. And I'll pass the ball to Shaq.
Well, he's going to grab the ball, whether you pass it or not. He grabs the ball anyway.
No. I was waiting. No, I just want to say, look, when we watch a lot of movies like Saw, and there was another one called The Cube, Squid Games more recently. I won't give you any spoilers for those of you that haven't seen it. But what you see is characters that don't get along, where there's a lot of conflict, who end up respecting each other and almost loving each other or having that affinity toward each other.
That's not on the news, though. That's a movie.
No, that's right. That's right. It's not
fake. That's all fake, meatball. All fake.
Right. So it's not on the news. Now, when I was in the United States last time, I visited I didn't visit. I was invited down to the Charlotte Museum of History. Mm-hmm. And when I went there, they were raising funds for the Sloan School, which was one of the first schools in North Carolina, or it's one of the last ones that still remains. That was essentially a slave school. It was a school for the recently emancipated slaves. And I actually went to one of the local council people's houses. I went to the school. I visited it. I went to the house. I actually met a lovely lady. I think she was about 100, and she passed away, unfortunately, last year. And one of the questions that a couple of people asked me was, why would you, an ethnically Indian, person from Australia and Britain, why do you have an interest? Because I did donate a reasonable sum of money to that. Why are you interested in this? And my answer was because the story of American slavery is not just an American story. It's only an American story insofar as what happened in America, but it's an international story as to what happened all over the world. Mm-hmm. And my ancestors, obviously, were taken by the British at some point. And I don't think they went willingly. So, there's a history. One of my great-great-great-great-great-grandparents would have gone to a school that was similar to that and would have faced similar prejudices. So, I was very interested in that. But, when it comes to media coverage on that, there's hardly anything. I troll through North Carolinian news. I obviously, as Kim knows, I know Dan Forrest. I talked to him about it. And, there's very little information actually out there about what's happening with things like that. So you don't have to necessarily be a good news story, but could we just focus on things that bind us together rather than all the things that take us apart? And I think that's a real shame. I think that's what we're saying is we're not understanding each other. And COVID has been one of those things as well. People have taken sides. They've become tribal. If you're vaccinated, don't hang out with people that aren't vaccinated, and et cetera, et cetera. People become very tribal. They don't understand that everybody's scared. Those people who are not getting the vaccine because they're afraid that, it's some sort of government conspiracy, they're also afraid, oh shit, what if I don't take the vaccine and I die or my loved one dies from COVID? Is it my fault? People are scared. The people who go and get the vaccine, and I know a lot of people here, most of you panelists have had it, don't tell me that it wasn't exactly the same thing. You walked in and just before they put the needle in, you sort of closed your eyes and went, oh, geez, I hope I'm doing the right thing. I hope the conspiracy theorists aren't.
People are scared. Basic motivators you learn in sales. Basic motivators you learn in sales. Fear and greed sell. So the thing is, if you're not pushing fear and you're not pushing greed, there's no sale. So you got to look for the fear and the greed.
Well, our politicians, Nick, are not supposed to be salespeople.
They are. They're selling fear and greed. You guys are trying to sell good stuff.
They are supposed to be our representatives. They're supposed to be our representatives. They're not our leaders. They are our representatives, and they should start.
But where's the fear and greed in doing something good? There is no fear. There is no greed. There is no news, and you're not on the media.
I got a question to ask everyone. Did anyone recognize that screen I shared? Some good news?
Some good news? No. No one watches.
Okay, how many people have actually watched it? How many people? Okay, so this is the problem. This is the problem. He should have been on CBS every day, or NBC, or ABC, or IBM TV every day. He should have been broadcasted everywhere. We all should have heard of him and heard of what he was doing.
They do that at the end of every news story for 1
minute. Great news story. Wonderful celebrity who took his time for free and did this. And he went out to find good news stories and promoted them.
Come on, Kim. Okay, all major news media, what they do is they show blood and guts for 55 minutes. Then the last minute, they have the feel-good story to make them feel like they're doing something good, and then they end. They're all the same. So blood and guts sell. All your goody stuff, we'll put it 1 minute at the end of the program. So you can, at the end of this program, we'll devote 1 minute to good news. Let's bring in blood and guts.
But Nick, you could do it, right? There's been a mass shooting.
Yeah, you won't.
But look at the heroism of the people that actually helped somebody else they didn't need to help. Right? Look at the people that didn't run out of the building. Like you could show the blood and guts and also show the power of our humanity. Because if you don't show that, people, the everyday audience, loses faith in the everyday person that they come. The people look at their fellow person and they think, that person would kill me if they had the chance, and that's not the way it is. People are not like that.
We'll devote 1 minute. 1 minute to that. Let's spend 90 minutes focusing on the blood and guts that just took place. We'll spend 1 minute on your humanitarian liberal thoughts, and then let's move on. Because the thing is, we need to bring up our ratings. We don't give a
there you go, Bob. The Democrat
happened.
We wonder why there's so many mass shootings.
The trust fund baby Democrats calling me a liberal again.
No, I heard that. But Shaquille, to your point, and it actually comes up to something we brought up in the news show earlier today.
Here we go.
When the shooting happened at South Point, that was actually one of the news stories that did come out of that.
It was
were actually doing heroic things during that time. So there were people that were like shop owners that were pulling people into the shop. There were people that were there basically to shop. They were not there because of their medical training, but because they had medical training, they helped with some of the victims and things of that nature. So that story was covered, and that was an example of positive news story. But I did have a
Mark, look, the shooting in Christchurch that I talked about
second place because no one died.
The shooting in Christchurch I talked about before. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern decided it would be a really great idea to veil herself in Muslim garb, right, to show solidarity with the Muslim people. Give me a break. Like, seriously, please, give me a break. I'm not going to sit there the next time there's a mass shooting of Black Americans and start braiding my hair and start, singing rap songs, okay? I'm not going to do that because it would be insulting to Black people. To see this white leftist Prime Minister of New Zealand start thinking that somehow shows solidarity. It doesn't show solidarity. Take it off. Look like you normally do and just say, look, I'm really sorry this happened to you. Don't insult the rest of us. Oh, look, look how white.
That's called tokenism, and I'm not a big fan of tokenism.
Oh, well, apparently you are. You're out for affirmative action.
But David, I do have a question for you coming back to the media discussion, which is what the discussion was about and everything. One of the things that came about during this whole time, I'd say over the last 10 or 15 years, was there was a push for a lot of our local communities to have local reporting and local things of that nature. So there was a big push for low power radio stations. I'm actually part of a low power radio station called WCOM. I'll be perfectly honest, the actual output of the station, about like your transistor radio. That's probably most low power radio. But low power radio has also become internet radio. So therefore they have a bigger base than they may go in terms of their actual coverage. Because if you come to Carborough, which is where the station is based, I can tell you I can't hear it right here in Durham unless I go on the internet because it's a low power radio station. But I could go to Australia and I could hear WCOM because it is also an internet radio station. Right. So I was wondering what your thoughts about this kind of move toward maybe more, because there's a lot of coverage, and it even comes back to something I was going to ask DeMonte as well, because we're getting a lot of coverage where it's maybe overly democratized because we're having various Black newspapers, we're having various women's papers, we've got these different communities that have got different publications as well. So do you think that we've gotten to a point where maybe it's just that everybody has got their mouthpiece and that can be a good thing or a bad thing? I'd love to hear from David.
Yeah, the fragmentation of news is definitely a problem, especially ideologically. But I think what's even more sad is the nationalization or the internationalization of politics. Even down in Australia, Shaquille knows what's going on here. We wear it on our sleeve here in America.
In all fairness, I pay a lot of attention to America. I spend a lot of time there.
But I feel like that's the world's favorite sport is watching America fail. I mean, they love that over in Western Europe, and they love to remind us every time.
And they like it in Western Australia too, but let's not go.
But, I think it's really sad because if you think about the touch points we have with government, they're mostly local and state. And if you really want to make a difference, really in terms of things like community policing, urban planning, affordable housing, healthcare, a lot of that is local and state level. And I feel especially passionate about those types of issues, especially in places that are a heaping dumpster fire like California, where I'm sitting. We desperately need reform at the local level. I think what Nick is saying is right. If it bleeds, it leads. I've been a journalist for a long time. I think the problem with the media, though, is that we take it a step further. And that's where what Kim said is correct, is we try to extrapolate these like lessons from what happened. And it's like, no, we're not looking for lessons. When the media tries to divide Black and white America, they're forgetting that the majority of people in California are not Black or white. And I'm one of those people, right? So these are tired narratives, right, that have nothing to do with today anymore. You're trying to fire up an old battle that was going on before my family even arrived here, right? It's very relevant, of course, but or when you're trying to fire up, atheists versus religious people. What Kim is saying is correct. Most people are normal. Shaquille said this as well. Most people are normal, and I think news instead, what it looks to do is take these old battles, mostly the battles of our fathers and our grandfathers, and kind of reinsert them in the present. And what they don't realize is that with changing demographics and changing norms and really a cultural war that has largely been won, a lot of these aren't even relevant anymore.
David, I just want to say in defense of Western Europeans and other people around the world, it's not that we enjoy you failing, right? I certainly don't. I have a great affinity and love for the United States. But when you guys walk around saying that you're the best country in the world, you're the best country that ever existed, and the best one, which always makes the rest of us laugh, is we have the most amount of freedom. USA, USA. The rest of the world sits there and goes, yeah, you're so free. Wow. Right. Yes, we laugh. But nobody wants to see you guys fail. And I'd love you to after this show, I'll send you a link. A song by Celtic Women called Oh America. And you should listen to that song because it shows you how many of your allies feel about the United States. But what I'll also say is that when it comes to biased media and division, that happens. But what the rest of the world sometimes sees is something that doesn't make sense to the rest of us. So we'll see things like AOC saying that the disparity in healthcare outcomes between white Americans and black Americans is a cause of climate change. But she says that on something which is international media. So I sit there and say, okay, so should I go to Uganda then and say, hey, you should send money to America for black healthcare in America? I know you're one of the poorest countries on earth, but the disparity between black and white healthcare in America is the cause of climate change. Obviously not, because it's absurd. But it gets so much media coverage in America that it trickles around the world. And so we look at it and just go, you guys are insane. Because you are trying to take domestic political issues and thrust it onto the world stage as if somehow the difference between black and white Americans is somehow more important than the difference between Indigenous Australians and white Australians, or black people in the United Kingdom and white people in the United Kingdom. How could that possibly be the case? How could that possibly be a cause of climate change? That's why people.
I guess you, and I agree that it's not a cause of climate change. There's other things with climate change. But Shaquille, it's interesting you bring that up because, as I have mentioned a couple of times, I think I might have even mentioned on one of our other shows, I participated in a African American economic forum that was done for a week, about a week and a half ago, and things of that nature. One of the speakers actually had mentioned going to Africa. I think they had gone to Nigeria, or maybe it was Ghana, one of the African nations, but they had a different perception of African Americans here because in their mind, they were thinking that every African American in the United States was bathing in money and was definitely like just wasting their money because of the images that they had gotten from media. They had gotten this viewpoint because they had watched our rap videos, and because they saw those rap videos, and that's the image of the rap videos, that's the perception that they had of all of the youth in America that are African American.
All African Americans are rap and rich, and with that, we're going to take a quick commercial. See, I think David would like that. That was the 10.
I'm back.
He's back. That was very quick at everything. So.
Right, very quick, fast, gone. David, it appeals to those TikTok people that watch your shows, or whoever they are.
What Mark said before the little break is kind of. I mean,
now you know. You put on the turnover chain, go like this. Yeah. Come on, Trevon. Then go to Europe, and they'll go. He's a rich rapper. That's what he does.
Yeah, no. When I visited,
like Shaquille does.
No, what were you saying, Tremonte?
Yeah, no.
This is why my kidnap insurance has gone up so much, Nick. This is why.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, you shouldn't be driving.
Hold on a second. We want to hear from Tremonte.
I don't drive one in the United States.
Let's hear from Tremonte.
Okay.
No. I was just saying real quick. Like those images, they really do resonate with people in different countries because when I traveled abroad, I clearly was like the first Black person that some people had seen. And I could tell by the way they were looking at me, the stare. There weren't racist stares, but they were like, man, I've never seen someone like this in person before. And it was interesting because I was younger, but I have my tattoos and everything, and so like that's literally the first thing that they thought, right? Was like that I was either I guess like an athlete or a rapper, because the only images that they saw of Black folks in their country was that. So yeah, that is that, and this was some time ago, but that was something that resonated with me in my travels. But it wasn't again. It was more of a just they were more. It was more of a fascination than a fear or anything. I didn't feel I didn't feel necessarily discriminated against. It was just they just seemed more fascinated to actually see 6 foot something, 200-pound muscular Black person with tattoos in person. And this was in Spain, Andalusia, in Seville and Sevilla. I spent some time, and I traveled throughout. So yeah,
that's on my list to go to.
That's the reason why I say that the race, what appears to be the race divide in America, it's being egged on by media. It's not, in my experience, it's just not like that in America. My experience in America was no different to my experience in Europe. I went to a little town called Andernach, this beautiful little village in Germany, to this little church thing where I had the King's Singers, who are from King's College in Cambridge, at this beautiful little church. And I'm telling you, I was the only person for ages that wasn't white. And when I walked into these, cobbled streets and all this sort of stuff, people were looking at me. But they weren't looking at me aggressively. They were sort of more looking at me out of surprise. They had no idea where I was from. I have an accent that they weren't quite sure where it was from either. And, it wasn't a racist thing. They were just like, wow, like he's different. And so many of them came up when they knew that I was visiting. They wanted to show me different things. I was only there for a few hours, so they didn't have much time. But they wanted to show me all sorts of different sites. But, Mark, the way that you talk about things in the United States, it's like if you go into the United States, you'll find all these people who are just racist over the most innocuous of comments. But that hasn't been my experience. When I go to America and they go, hey, where are you from? That's not them implying I don't belong there. That's them recognizing I don't have an American accent and, hey, tell us about where you're from. Can I show you can I show you our statue? Can I show you our little hidden gem? That's what it's all about.
It wasn't your experience, and I hate that Tamati left, but Nick can remember that he did talk about the fact of driving while Black. So it is a real thing. And he actually brought that up in our report that we did on Amante and everything. So he even brought up the difference of the reaction that he got being a driver, and I am not a driver, but I know my brothers had it, the difference of being that experience versus what somebody else of a different.
How do you know that though, Mark?
I'm saying I can tell you based on the personal experience of family members of mine, what Monty said in the story of the show.
Wait. How do you know that? I know the media likes to drum up this thing, this driving while Black. How do you know that? Have you ever been white and been pulled over?
I have been in a car that was pulled over, and yes, I did see the difference. And has my brother been pulled over, and he talked about it. Have people had to do different training because of being of a certain race or another? And there's even a thing, believe it or not, David may disagree with me.
Is this in recent times, or is this
in certain parts of the country as driving while Latin? Because I do think that sometimes Latin Americans can also have a certain.
Is this in recent time, or is this like
there's like a wealth of issues. Yeah, there's a wealth of issues where you would be correct on this one. I think driving while Black is a very real thing. If you try to go through TSA while Black, you're going to see it. And I think it's until you travel with a Black person that you see that there's a fundamental difference. There's a lot of statistical studies about the way Black people get treated by a jury of their peers in court. There are radically different outcomes. A lot of what you're saying, Shaquille, yes, it's all theater, it's all nonsense. But
David,
specifically those issues, I think Mark is correct.
David, when it comes to statistics, what have you guys got? What's that lizard thing for your insurance company? What's that green lizard?
Yeah,
right. So I was over there and I saw this ad when I was in LA last time. I saw this ad that 60% of people or something that changed to Geico save X percentage on their insurance, right?
60% of people save 15% or more on their Geico insurance.
That's what they're trying to
right.
People. Yeah.
Which is like, duh, because you wouldn't have changed if you weren't going to save, right?
Well, also you may not.
So
get
of
the same
course,
coverage.
hang on, Nick. So of course, there's a high percentage of people who have changed that saved insurance, and the amount that they saved was X amount, because otherwise I wouldn't have bothered changing. right? They don't list how many people made an inquiry, went to their website, etc., and realized insurance was going to be more expensive. My point being that you can do all sorts of weird and wonderful things with statistics, right? So the media takes something, twists it, either because they don't know any better or because they're doing it deliberately, and makes something seem like it's much worse than actually it is. I'm not saying that there is no racism in the United States, but to try to suggest that the United States is substantially more racist against blacks than other countries, I think that's a fallacy. And I think it's a fallacy that plays into the hands of mainstream media because it sells.
It sells. No, that point is true. Is the thing is it sells, and that's part of the reason they do that. Shaquille.
I guess what you're not considering, Shaquille,
push it.
What you're saying at the national level is 100% true. But because we have a federal system, just like you do in Australia, there's a lot of government fragmentation, right? And there's a lot of different situations depending on your geography. Here in Los Angeles, I'll be completely frank. I drive around, I'm white presenting with a Florida plate, no front plate, no California anything, and I go 95 miles an hour down the freeway. You know why? Because all the cops are in the hood. They just are. They are not here in West Los Angeles. They are never going to come after me. They are never going to look at me. So the chances of me getting pulled over is literally slim to none. If Mark were driving here, the chances of him getting pulled over would be exponentially greater.
David, but you don't know that. I'm sorry, but you don't, right? You're driving around West Los Angeles. You say you're white presenting. I cruised through there. I had a Chevy convertible. Trust me, I did not obey the speed limit ever. Okay. And I went zooming past a police officer about 30 miles an hour past the speed limit. And I thought, over here. What's the penalty? I'm sitting there. I was talking to my friend. I was like, what's the penalty? Am I going to go to jail? What happened? Didn't even get the lights on. Okay. Nothing happened. Okay. So this idea that every single black person is that oppressed, it hasn't been my experience. Now, what are they looking at me and going, oh, well, he's Australian. They don't know where I'm from. They don't know anything about me. You want to try and tell me that when Shaquille O'Neal or when some of these black actors, when Denzel Washington or like any of these guys, they're cruising around in a really luxury car, they're well dressed, they're being pulled over and treated like they're a hood rat.
A lot of it is economic, Shaquille, but in the United States,
of course it's economic. And so if they're hanging around Skid Row, if they're hanging around Compton, if that's where the police disproportionately are,
of course,
they're not there because the people there are black. They're there because people there are poor and there's a higher crime rate. Just like in Arkansas, there's more police presence in Little Rock, Arkansas, than there is in the more affluent parts of Arkansas.
But I'm saying, isn't part of that also have to do, and that's another media narrative that has gone on for decades. I was actually just reading a LinkedIn post from a friend of mine who, by the way, if I remember her ethnicity, is primarily one of the European American backgrounds, even though her boyfriend is of a minority population. But she was talking about gentrification and white flight and how that is a rotating cycle that, creates these kind of media dialogues as well. So do you not think that gentrification and white flight doesn't take place either, Shaquille? And that is even happening in the 21st century.
No, I don't. I really don't. I don't think that every single thing that happens in the United States is related to race. And you know what? In old stories, like To Kill a Mockingbird, which the media wants to get rid of because of savior, right? Oh, it's a white savior syndrome. Or what's that one with Time to Kill, right? With those great actors in it. And at the end of that film, he brings his white children to the black part to try and show solidarity. That's the message that the mainstream media doesn't want to show. They never want to show how people connect. They never want to show how people ignore skin color and connect. They only ever want to show the times when something appears to be racist, when there's something there that appears to divide us.
It sells.
Why?
It sells.
The four of us come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. We're all different skin colors. We're all different ethnicities. We all come from different parts of the world, parts of the country, for those of you in the United States. And all media wants to do is try and divide us. I think it's appalling.
Well, I mean, because it goes back to what sells. I mean, the media is based on one thing: ratings, and it's based on commercial advertisement. Reviews. They don't give a rat's
exactly.
Rear.
Yes, but it permeates because
they're not.
But it permeates. David, you made the comment that maybe the reason why I haven't experienced or haven't seen sort of racism that you're talking about is because I didn't spend enough time with black people in the United States. I can tell you that 90% of my friends
Did I say that?
I think maybe it was Mark that said it. No, but the experience with the experience of being pulled over with a white driver is different to an experience being pulled over the black driver. Let me tell you, 90% of my friends around the world are white, except for in the United States. In the United States, the overwhelming majority, probably 95% of the people that hang out with the United States are black. We've been pulled over by the police. I've seen what's going on, right? And I'm not just talking about one or two states. I've been all over America. Right, I've seen it. I understand. I do get it that yes, there is some things that appear to be racist, but it's not as bad as what the media is trying to make out.
No, number one, don't drive a sports car. That I can tell you, Shaquille.
No, of any race, no
sports car. Forget it. A sports car. I got rid of my sports car a long time ago because I was getting pulled over going 35 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. Like, no kidding. I'm going.
I took a Rolls Royce out when I was in Florida.
A Rolls Royce is not a sports car.
It depends on what you're doing with the sports car. Because I mentioned before, my brother is a member of a slingshot club, the Polaris Slingshot Club, but they do a lot of social justice work. They do, well, not justice work, but they do a lot of work in the community, like providing items. They're doing things that are making them community based. So I don't know of any of those members that are getting pulled over, and that's definitely considered somewhat of a sport.
My cousin who lives in Fairfield in California, he has a Corvette. I'd never seen one in the flesh because they're quite rare here.
Really?
So I wanted to see it. I jumped in it and I said, "Hey, like, can we go for a drive?" And I'll tell you what, I don't scare easily, but this brother can drive. And he was going at speeds that just unheard of, like 120 miles an hour. And I'm like, dude, you're going to either get us killed or get us
normal in North Carolina, but go on.
But nothing happened. Nothing happened to us. One, I survived it.
This is a story.
One, I survived it. And two, we didn't get pulled over. Nothing happened. There was no problems. Nick, after the show, I'll actually show you the video of me sitting in it. But, nothing happened. So the idea that every single thing that does happen to black people must be because of racism. It's just not true. There are some things that
I don't think anyone's
motivated by race, but not every single thing.
I don't think anyone's. I've never heard of the idea of every single thing must be because of racism.
Tamante, you're going to speak to Mark a bit more often.
I've never said that. If you watch the shows, I've never said that everything has to do with racism. You keep trying to put words in my mouth, and I'm not having it.
I've never heard of that. And also, man, welcome to Miami, man. 120 is nothing. If you come down here, they're going to zip past you. And not that I'm glamorizing drag racing, but they're going to zip past you doing at least that.
Yeah, you're 120 miles an hour. You're going slow, and
and it's going to be in a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. It's going to be really.
I've actually been down to Miami once for one night, and that was I was going backstage with Mark Ronson at what's it called? Club Live, Club Ovo. What's that great nightclub?
One of the most famous clubs in the world.
Yeah, that was the first time because my friends that lived in Fort Lauderdale were like, "You're never going to get in there," but I knew some people and I was going in there, so and I brought them along.
Oh, you got in, Shaq?
Oh, of course, I had backstage.
Cool.
I didn't have to line up. I had security was all lined up. They're like,
I got the hookup. When you come back, I got the hookup, so you don't have to.
Oh no, definitely. I love Fort Lauderdale. I actually like Fort Lauderdale more than Miami, but I'm definitely a fan of going out to Miami.
Is Beds still around? Because Beds was a very popular club in Miami.
Beds out.
No.
It's been out for a while.
It's been gone. Yeah, they have Story now. Story, Live. Yeah,
I've heard of Live, and I've heard that that's a very popular one as well. I know we're winding down, David, but David, one question I was going to ask you, because I've run across this in different media. Do you ever get tired of when it is, and comes back to something that Shaquille was mentioning, when it is one generalization about a population? Like we talk about Hispanic media, we talk about all of this, and I know, because I've marched up to you before, that somebody from Peru is not going to be the same from Colombia, and there are magazines that are geared toward a wide part of the population, but I don't know that they can cover all of the population, even if they are Latin American based and everything. So I just wondering your thoughts about that, because I know we've got a couple of magazines and some radio stations here in this area that claim to be Latin based, but I don't know that they cover the entirety of the Latin American community.
I wish there were even a fundamental understanding of the generalizations of Latin Americans and people of Latin American descent in the United States. I think recently, until very, very recently, the media just portrayed a very, middle America white population. And then we've had this awakening with more black voices and whatnot in the past year. But Latin Americans and Asian Pacific and, people of South Asian descent like Shaquille still TBD in American media. We really fundamentally only see white and black people through media. We see a little bit more. Disney just came out. They're pushing a movie called Encanto coming up, and you see Lin-Manuel Miranda. So you see little tidbits of Latin American, identity. And, we are the largest minority in this country, but you wouldn't know it if you watch the media.
No, I agree.
Why does it matter? Like I'm a minority in Australia technically, but I don't care if there's no other Fijian, Indian descendants who are British citizens that are on TV. I don't care. Let me just watch the cartoon. Let me just watch the TV show. I don't need to identify. I don't care.
You don't care, but what about if it's an issue that deals with it? A friend of mine actually did, and this was maybe 10 years ago.
It deals with what? It deals with what? Just treat me like everybody else.
But it doesn't have to be negative. It's just fun. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And they did,
stories
and
that represent our food, our life experience.
Right.
I'm not saying I just watched White Lotus, which is a bunch of white people in Hawaii doing their thing, and I fundamentally enjoyed it very much. I'm just saying we want to hear those stories. They don't come at the expense of other stories.
And with that,
if they don't come at the expense of anyone else's story, David, I'm all for it. But when other people's voices get drowned out, especially when white voices get drowned out, that's what I'm against. I don't think that to empower us, we need to hurt other people.
Your voice is about to be drowned out as we're out of time. Okay, and we'll see you next week. For all our viewers on Media Monday, we'll see you then.